If you want to put your adventuring party in a hostile environment, then a swamp is a pretty good choice. A waterlogged, disorienting landscape home to lurking monsters and infectious diseases. It can feel like a real slog trying to navigate those waterways and adventure through. In the most classical fantasy sense, swamps are often these symbols of decay, corruption, and death. Swamps are a wild place, one that is far from the comforts of urban civilization. Hi, welcome aboard the Earthmote. I'm Randall. Welcome to my thematic terrain series where we explore the different terrain types that we use in our hex crawls and sandbox campaigns. The purpose of these videos are to break down their unique themes and how those apply to the features and monsters that call them home. So let's go ahead and venture into the mires for this week's episode of Thematic Terrains. I think to start our discussion on these different terrain types, we need to take a look at how they have been presented contextually in literature and throughout human culture. Nature and the different biomes of our planet Earth are ripe with symbolism and meaning that humans have attributed to them. And I think that if you want to design some fun areas for your sandbox or your campaign world, you might as well lean into some of those themes and at least borrow from them to kind of represent that to your players. Swamps, bogs, mires, marshlands all have a few central themes that come up time and time again. The first theme is this idea of swamps as boundaries and in between spaces. Because swamps sit between solid ground and open water, they represent this idea of a boundary, this transitional space between the known and the unknown. Characters crossing them are often in a stage of transformation or testing. What's interesting here is using a swamp in this manner works well from both sides in which the party might travel from. If the party is entering the swamp from the open water side, then they do so with anticipation of what land lies beyond this first initial test. And if the party enters the swamp from the land side, they do so in hope of finding shorelines that will afford them easier mobility and navigation to other distant lands, assuming they have a watercraft on the other side to use. Swamps that are used in this thematic function as a boundary present this idea of uncertainty. Paths disappear, the land shifts, and visibility is often poor. Swamps embody ambiguity, danger, and uncertainty, both physically and psychologically. When designing our swamps under this function, I think we do well to really build up that idea of mystery surrounding these wetlands, both what lies within and what lies beyond them. Secondly, a popular framing of swamplands is one of decay and rot. The smell of stagnant water, rotting vegetation, and even the sight of hidden bones in the mud has long given swamps an association with corruption and death. In the classical and medieval imaginations, marshes and swamplands often serve as metaphors for hellish terrain or gateways to the underworld. In Dante's Inferno, we see where Styx is a swampy, wrath-filled mire. Even within Dungeons and Dragons, the game we talk most about, within their established cosmology, we see Mineros, the third layer of hell, described as a swamp, and the gaping maw and Shadok La, the slime pits, two layers of the infinite abyss, are both described as swamps, bogs, and marshes home to the wicked demon princes. Historically, swamps were feared as a source of malaria and miasma, making them stand for sickness, weakness, and societal corruption. They tend to really represent these strong ideas of disease and pestilence. This second idea, the second theme of swamps, is definitely probably the most trope laden in that we associate swamps with kind of being these dark places of death and decay, but there's nothing wrong with that. They are tropes for a reason, and if your players are expecting that, then there's nothing wrong with leaning into that trope and providing that sort of fantasy experience for them. It's a good one to understand and have a grasp on so you can decide how you want to either twist it or bend it or apply it within your own campaign worlds. dungeons. Lastly, swamps are often presented as these places of mystery and misunderstood magic. Swamps have often been associated with enchanted or cursed terrain. Folklore often places witches, hags, and other magical beings in swamps where human civilization feels far away and remote. A common element we see come up under this theme is the idea of illusions and spirits. Marsh lights or will-o'-the-wisps symbolize false hopes and lure these travelers into danger. Swamps are places where reality blurs with trickery and the supernatural. I think swamps can also represent this idea of hidden and or forbidden knowledge. Swamps hide ancient secrets, forgotten ruins in the muck, or wisdom that can only be found by the brave or foolish enough to enter them and seek it out. You can also see this idea play out with dark wizards practicing their black magics away in these swamps. I think in conjunction with our second thematic function, decay and death, it's no coincidence that necromancy is often associated with swamplands, and that definitely ties nicely into this third idea of forbidden magics within these swamps. With an idea on those recurring themes that come from our swamps and marshes, I think there are a few ways that we can functionally present our wetlands to our players that make them interesting places to adventure in. And these different ways are going to give us different narrative outcomes that we might be able to present to our players. Of course, you are free to mix and match these different themes and ideas as you see fit, but I'm going to present our three functions independently in this video just to give you an understanding of how each one stands, and then you can modify them from there. First, we had the theme of threshold or passage. The symbolic role of the swamp in this case is really to be this boundary crossing between the known and the unknown, life and death, possibly order and chaos. Your narrative function in this case is a physical and symbolic trial. The characters could be changed by what they endure while traversing through your swamp. Tools for designing these types of swamps, I would focus on things like heavy laden fog that kind of disorients the travelers, maybe shifting paths that help represent uncertainty. You can implement physical obstacles like sinking mud, unseen predators definitely play well in this type of trial. And then you could even implement things that have sort of ritual undertones, maybe crossing as a descent or ordeal. Maybe there's some sort of religious undertones within your campaign that are associated with this place that would make it some sort of trial to the pious. So use this type of swamp if you want it to really serve as kind of this rite of passage. It's sort of a testing ground for heroes or a symbolic threshold into another stage of the journey within your campaign sandbox. Secondly, we had the thematic idea of corruption and decay. The symbolic role really here is to embody the ideas of rot, disease, and stagnation, possibly even sort of a allegory to society's festering underside. Your narrative function in this case is really to kind of represent moral decline, maybe these cursed lands, or possibly kind of lingering weight of past sins within your game world. Now, tools for design here, I would definitely lean into kind of foul smells, lots of nagging insects that kind of irritate the travelers, bones half buried in the muck to represent this sort of past decline, poisonous plants and animals to kind of up the danger and sort of the ideals of death within the swamplands, and then of course ruins that are sinking into the mire to represent that slow decay over time. So I would use this type of swamp if I want to kind of emphasize those ideas of moral or societal breakdown, or create a swamp that just really feels oppressive, contaminated, and possibly grotesque. Lastly, we had the theme of mystical and forbidden knowledge. In this case, our symbolic role of the swamp is to act as a keeper of secrets, a place where wisdom or cursed relics lie hidden in the mud and roots of your swamplands. The narrative function in this case is to act as a quest zone where discovery has a cost. Only those who are willing to risk corruption or danger are able to gain this knowledge that has otherwise been lost to the greater world. Now, tools for designing these types of swamps, again, you can lean into those half sunken ruins, ancient shrines that are submerged within your swamplands. You could look to include magical creatures that are tied to this forgotten lore and really play up the swamp as a labyrinth of secrets, perhaps, that secrets are really only going to reveal themselves to the worthy or those desperate enough to undertake the ordeal of your swamplands. So use this type of swamp if you're looking to guard a mystery. It's a place where truth or power are accessible to those who are willing to seek it out, but only through risk and possibly sacrifice. There are a lot of different monsters that you can use to showcase these different thematic functions in our wetlands. And I think many have crossover appeal between these themes, making it really easy to mix and match them if you're trying to blend some of those different thematic functions together. In the case of swamps as threshold boundaries or passages, I think looking first at our large mundane monsters, so giant crocodiles, giant snakes, turtles, toads, and lizards all work really well as hidden dangers at the water's edge. If you want to use sentient folk, you have bullywug, lizard folk, and snake men, all of which are intelligent denizens that may determine whether outsiders can pass through these lands or not. And then you can also look at insect swarms and giant insects. Both work as sources of attrition and irritation that kind of symbolize the swamp's hostility to humankind. Trolls, hydras, froghemoths, and dragons are types of fantastical beasts that represent danger to the party when crossing through wetlands. I think all those work really well. All of these creatures make the swamp feel like a grueling obstacle, really emphasizing that idea of survival and vigilance through a harsh and hostile land. Next, for the themes of corruption and decay, I think looking at carrion crawlers, otugs, shambling mounds all represent decay, filth, and rot in their own unique ways, but really play up those ideas. You could use things like plague changed or diseased beasts, maybe just reskinning some of those crocodiles, snakes, or boars, and then giving them some sort of poison or disease-like abilities. I think oozes also work really well for this type of theming, gray oozes, black puddings, and so on. Myconoids could be a humanoid type creature that have a nice representation of decay. If you want to have an alien yet sentient being in these types of swamplands. And then lastly, I do think we'd be remiss if we did not mention the undead. Undead are the ultimate representation of corruption of life. All types could work really well in swamps. You got your skeletons, your zombies, your will-o'-the-wisps, your specters, your wraiths, your liches. You get the idea. If you have undead present in your swamp, then I think you should give some thought and care to the source of them. Was it a sunken civilization, an ancient battlefield? Why are some of these former humanoids in this environment, and why are they still there now? Use these types of monsters to make your swamp feel like a living wound where corruption itself has become predatory. And lastly, we have the themes of mystical and forbidden knowledge. I think hags and witches are an immediate standout here. Could be a coven who work their eerie arcane magics in the remote isolation of the swamplands. On a similar line, you have your dark wizards, your necromancers that practice black magic. They work really well here. We've already mentioned liches, but that's just another type of wizard that works well here too, of course. I think Naga are an interesting keepers of forbidden magical knowledge. Could definitely see them dwelling in ruins with these lost artifacts that are sinking into the swamplands. That would be really cool. And depending on how deep your swamps run or what sort of bodies of water they are connected to, I think you could also use Abolus, this sort of greater alien intelligence power, kind of Cthulhu-like from ancient times, that has the ability to dominate sentient minds. All of these creatures do a nice job of framing the swamp as a place where there is power, but at a dangerous cost. So hopefully that gives you some ideas on how swamps and marshes are represented symbolically and thematically. I think there's a lot of great themes that we can pull from to make our swamps unique and interesting situations to present to our adventuring parties. Mix and match these different themes to present different vibes, ideas, narratives to your party. Throughout the coming weeks, we'll be covering more of these terrain videos mixed in with other content to keep it from getting too repetitive on the channel. But there will be a playlist on my channel page if you want to check out more of these thematic terrain videos. Let me know in the comments how you like to use Swamplands in your sandbox games. Do you think I missed anything that we should cover in these types of videos? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help out a lot. Check out Enchanted Nimbus, my monthly newsletter. Thanks for hopping aboard the Earthmote. I'll see you in the next one.